Hello and welcome to Hamwood Park. It's a Grade 1 listed building, part of the National Heritage, and gives us something to think about in these very interesting times. It was built in 1792, 3 years into the French Revolution, and at the time of the bursting forth of the agricultural revolution. And that was why it was built as a temple of Dionysus. Dionysus was the life force of all green growing things. Inside the temple is this plaque depicting Dionysus doing various things, one of which is rescuing the drunken man. Now, the drunken man is Selinus. He's the historian. He's so frustrated that people don't take notice of history that he takes the bottle and gets drunk. Dionysus is not just the god of all green growing things, he's the god of disorder, madness, and thus, of course, the association with drunkenness. And this house in the 1950s was turned into flats. A big house like this, you really turn into flats only in worship of money. And this house was in worship of mammon, drunk with it and growing mushrooms, growing in it, dry rot. Led Zeppelin, the modern gods of excess, whose followers achieved ecstasy in their course of their ceremonies, their pop concerts, and whose appearance often brought violence perceived to be a threat to conventional order, came and rescued the house by dereliction. The house puts our current situation into context from which we can navigate better. Our society has been in worship of money for rather a long time, and the disruption caused by the virus has stopped the money go round, and we're learning the consequences. And our money has been dissociated from our food, and our long supplies of chains from soil producer to mouths and eating is too long. And so I'm going to introduce you today to Dave. Right. Now, I understand you've been in parts of the world where suddenly the money go around has stopped and food has become a little bit difficult.
Yes.
Where have you been?
Well,
What's your experience?
I've experienced it a few times. I was in Japan in 2011 when they had the tsunami and the nuclear disaster, and I was in Tokyo, and I saw how very quickly, within 2 days, the shops were empty. In Japan, that's particularly because they use this system where they don't keep large stores of food anywhere. It's a logistics system where things come in from large depots overnight, every night. So that didn't work. As great as the system was on an everyday, day-to-day basis, as soon as one cog in the wheel was taken out, the whole system collapsed.
And you were in Athens too.
Yeah, it was a few years ago. At the time, they were having all the problems with the EU, and the economy was taking a terrible hit. And I was actually staying with some nuns up in the mountains, and we went down into Athens for a couple of weeks. I was with a filmmaker who was making a film about the food supply chain and the problems they have with seeds and being allowed to plant heritage seeds. And in Athens, the city was falling apart at that time. There were huge piles of garbage in the streets that hadn't been collected because everybody was on strike. And people were very worried about their ability to buy food. Pensions were slashed, and income for some people was zero.
And so the reason why we're here today is because Dave's had this experience, and he's been thinking about how you grow food in small places when you're not quite prepared, but you do have to be prepared to some extent. Yes. So Dave is going to show us how.
The thing that came out of the Athens visit and experience was the guy who was my host in Athens was heavily involved with this idea. And we were making a few films like this, which are on YouTube somewhere. And the issue that really became apparent was people could find containers to grow food in. They could find small spaces on balconies where they could grow the food. Maybe not perfect environments, but they could grow something. But the real problem was, where do you get soil from? That was the issue that surprisingly came up that nobody seemed to have thought about. The idea of being able to find soil that was viable, where you could at least grow something. And following that, I really began to focus my ideas about, well, what would I do in that situation if I had to find a growing medium, i.e. soil, in a situation like that. And over the last few years, I've had some great adventures foraging for soil.
So let's go and see what ideas you have.
You want to see the soil?
Yes, because we want to see the soil.
Here, we have a part of soil which we sieved from the garden to try and make it a little bit finer. I've got a dirty old dustpan. Now, again, I keep mentioning this, under normal circumstances, I'd try and use something a little bit better quality. But we're hypothesising that we're in an emergency situation and we've got to grow something with what we have. So we're going to use this, and it'll be interesting for you to see what kind of result we get with this. Because this is the kind of soil you might have lying around in your garden that just needs a quick sieve. So I've just filled that up. If you had a compost heap, I'd probably mix it 50-50 with some of this soil and some compost. But this really is, honestly, this is just what you've got lying around sieved. So it'll be interesting to follow and see how healthy the plants are when we grow them in this. As I said, maybe under normal circumstances I'd invest in something a little bit higher quality, but it's quite exciting to see what you can get. After all, gardening in its simplest form is putting a seed in the ground. So that's the level we're going to.
So here we've got our compost bins from a few years ago, and at the bottom there's some really good stuff.
This is compost that's come out of one of these modern plastic bin composters that you see. Again, I don't use this system personally for composting, but this might be something you might find in your garden or somebody else's garden. It's got all kinds of garbage in that people put in, through ignorance really. There's bits of plastic, chicken bones, all kinds of stuff that shouldn't theoretically go into compost for all kinds of reasons. But this might be something under extenuating circumstances that you find yourself needing to use. I'd give it a smell and see, does it smell healthy? It's not too sticky. So yeah, this is probably just on the limit of being composted enough to be usable. So you'd probably mix it 50-50 with that soil that we put in the box. I mentioned earlier different linings for the boxes. That's polystyrene there. Just a piece of polystyrene I saw cut up to the correct size. And on here, I put in the bottom just some of these covers that people use when you're decorating. You get them from B&Q and places. Some dirty old ones, just put them in the bottom with some holes in, just to stop the soil washing away. Behind us we also have another greenhouse structure where the roof is still there, but we're going to have to take that down, and over the next few weeks you'll be able to follow us as we turn that from a shambles, the kind of place you might come across in a city where you think you might want to grow something, into one of these places where we're going to get a lot of food. It's going to involve a lot of hard digging, a lot of dismantling.
Dave, have you come across kombucha?
Kombucha, it's some kind of fermented drink, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a bacterial culture. I was growing some the bacterial cultures off something my friend gave me, and now I've got enough.
What, were they drinking it?
Yeah.
You were selling it and drinking it?
Well, he hadn't quite got to the stage of selling it yet.
Okay.
But it was more experimentation. I just thought, how do we upscale this?
Well, actually, that is very relevant to what we were talking about in the greenhouse before, where we're looking for alternative ways to feed plants. If we can't buy chemical feeds, this would make a great supplement to give to potted plants and things. Yeah, I'll take it. What do I do? Just put some warmish water in and leave it for a few days?
It needs to be slightly acidic. It needs to have some sugar to feed on.
And then
you need to create an atmosphere that inhibits mold growth.
Yeah.
And then it's fine.
Yeah. Does it need to be aerobic?
It's not anaerobic. You just leave it open air.
Okay, great. I'll take it. Thank you very much.
Super easy. Anyway, leave it to it.
Great, thanks. Wow. There's a bonus. So let's have a look. Let's see what this is. Right, now if you have a look, that's what you find in the bottom of a cider barrel. In the old oak brandy barrels and cider barrels in Normandy, you find this kind of fungal growth. That is a real bonus because we can use that as a feed. And it goes to show you never know what's lying around or what your neighbours might have up their sleeve, because that just solves a problem we were talking about in there. Tremendous as a result.